Welcome to the Social Podcast, where no discussion or debate is off limits.
Happy Monday. Welcome to the Social. We do know it is election day across the nation today, but the other top story that is top of mind for so many people today is, of course, this weekend's SUV attack on a Filipino festival in Vancouver. Now, what was supposed to be a festival celebrating culture and inclusion has left a community shattered. So far, 11 people have been killed, with more than 20 others injured, and a 30-year-old Vancouver man. He's actually been charged with, so far, 8 counts of second-degree murder. We do have more charges expected to happen very, very soon.
Mel, we know you're a part of the Filipino-Canadian community, and you even have family out in Vancouver?
I do. I have an aunt and an uncle, so of course the family chat lit up right away to find out who was there, who had attended. Luckily, they decided not to go to the festival, which was a huge sigh of relief for us. But, you know, Vancouver is home to the second largest Filipino community outside of Toronto. There's at least 140,000 strong. There were 100,000 people in attendance at that festival. So you can imagine that the majority of the community was actually there. And that is the part that's frightening to me.
And how is the community doing? Like,
you know, anybody who knows a Filipino person, there's 2 things that represent us: family and faith. And that is being tested very heavily right now, but that is the very thing that I think is going to get the community there through this. The Lapu-Lapu Festival, it's a relatively new festival, but the guy that they celebrate, it is definitely a joyful festival, but it is also a festival that represents resistance against those who would do you harm. And so it is an interesting thing that the community is being tested now to resist against the hate, the hurt, and quite frankly, the terror that has descended upon the community. So I just want to say, you know, Filipinos live love. It is what we are known for. We are with you. Canada is with you. So it's going to be a very, very hard time, but I just have to say mabuhay. So keep going.
yeah. Beautiful.
Keep going.
Thank you for that.
Well said, Mel. Very well said. All right, so our next story, the Alzheimer's Society of Canada estimates that more than 771,000 people live with dementia, and that number is expected to reach nearly 1 million by 2030. So CTV News is reporting that some families are resorting to putting GPS trackers on elderly parents, sometimes with some without consent. All right, so should we be talking about consent with aging parents? Yeah? Audience, you guys are all kind of on the same page?
Everyone's
This is a really interesting question. Listen, right now, according to the Alzheimer's Society, over 770,000 Canadians are living with dementia, and that number is expected to hit 1 million by the year 2030. That's only 5 years away. I think we absolutely should be having this discussion with our aging parents right now.
Yeah. Well, what if we're not able to have that discussion? What if our parent is already in the early stages of dementia? We can't have the discussion.
So you'd be the caregiver.
Would we be going against their wishes? What do you...
I know, but I think it's a different situation. Listen, I did this, and I tell everybody that I meet, you should do this. Because, don't get me wrong, I respect someone's privacy, but when your parents reach that stage of life, you need to accept that they are not the parent that you grew up with. They're in a different stage, and you need to look out for them. You need to be 5 steps ahead of wherever they're doing. So my dad had vascular dementia, which meant that his short-term memory wasn't great, but his long-term was great. He knew his name, his address. My dad would also love to go for walks. He would go for 2 to 3 walks a day. I think we have footage of me just recording my dad. That's my dad going on one of his walks.
I love this.
And I love that he wanted to get outside and get exercise. But there was one day I was watching the news, and there was a guy whose father did not come home. And it was so eerily close to my situation. His dad was in his 70s, loved to go on walks. Everybody in the neighborhood knew him. That was exactly like my dad. And then one day, the father did not come home. And he was on the news explaining to people the last thing he saw his father wearing, where his dad usually walks, and was just asking the public, if you see my father, say something. Days and days went on, and they couldn't find his father. And that made me go to the store immediately and get a GPS tracker and put it in my dad's walker, because I'm like, and I didn't tell him, because I didn't want my dad to feel like I was treating him like a child, but I needed that peace of mind that I was never gonna get that phone call of like, we haven't seen your father and it's 10 p.m., where is he? I don't know, I never wanted an answer. So I tracked my dad, and I would pop up on him all the time, and he'd be like, I was just thinking about you, and then you appear, and I go, funny how that happened. I go, how that happened? But it was peace of mind, not just for me, it was peace of mind for everybody, and then my dad got to keep his freedom of going for his walks. So I tell everybody, low jack your parents.
Listen.
Low jack them.
I totally understand, and I think we're all on the same page here, especially from the perspective of potential caregivers and children of these of elderly parents. But when I think about it from my perspective of myself and getting older and imagining Jaya putting trackers on me, I'm going to be honest, it makes me feel uncomfortable because I think to myself, obviously, if I'm in full-blown dementia, I won't know. But if it's in the months or years leading up to that, what if I'm living my best life? And what if I'm having an affair? And it's true. I'm just saying.
Stay out of my business, right?
I'm just saying I don't know when that tipping point happens. Well, maybe okay, let's go with like a more wholesome scenario. Let's say I'm planning a really important surprise party for my grandchild, and I don't want people to know about that. Like, I think it's like the question is, when do we decide that it's appropriate to track our parents? Because they are, for all intents and purposes, they're adults, right? Before they get to that stage, should you have those conversations like, hey, do I get your consent to this? Because most parents, I think, would say yes if I'm
I agree
risk,
with, that sounds really lovely. The problem with dementia, it does not give you a heads up to say, you know what, tomorrow, Mom's not coming home. She's not going to remember her way home. That's the problem.
Right.
Having the discussion is great, but you don't know that day they're not going to come home, and you don't want to wait for that day. So be preemptive. If you want to have your affair, that's fine. I don't have to tell anybody about it, but I just need to know where you're at.
Yeah.
I just need to know where you're at. I just need to know where you're at.
I'm going home tomorrow, and I will ask my mother for permission, but I want to grab her phone, which she wears around her neck.
Perfect.
And which actually she had the foresight to, she had a stroke a couple of months ago. She's doing really well.
Good.
But she had the wherewithal. She couldn't dial 911, so she used the voice activation. I was like, oh, this is technology at its finest.
Yeah.
This was incredible. But I do want to be able to track her location now, thanks to you. So I am going to do
You're
that.
going to ask her for that. You're going to ask her.
She won't know what I'm doing anyway.
Okay, you're just gonna do it.
Yeah.
I think you know what? We just had a segment on the show recently. It was about advanced care planning. And I don't know about you, but my parents have always said the same thing. We do not want to be a burden to you, our adult children. And I think most of us, when we get to that stage, we want to be able to say the same thing. So I think what a beautiful conversation to say, and I said this during the segment, while your parents, if they've got their wits about them, and some are don't, but if they do, what a way to be able to open up a conversation and just say, hey, listen, what do you want the sunset years of your life to look like, and how can I help? And it could be, what do you want the last 5 or 10 or even 15 years to look like? And maybe, an air tag is in the document, an air tag is part of the conversation, because I do think, like my mother, I got her an Apple Watch just so I can track her heart rate. She's got high blood pressure, and it has fall detection. Like, technology is a beautiful thing, and she fully consents to it because she's alone so often during the day.
Okay, if she didn't consent to it, would you still give her the watch?
Well, here's the thing. She's got her head about, and my mother is so sharp, and she's like, track me, I track everything.
Okay.
But have that discussion before you.
I have to say, my mom has a pacemaker, and she has an app that tracks it. And I don't know if I would want that information because of the fluctuation. That might turn me into every 5 minutes just being like, oh my God, what's going on? She would be like, Jessie, I just had a very active bowel movement, nothing to worry about. So it's tricky, right?
Do it, because you know what? If your mom can't talk and something does happen, you'll have the information with the paramedic or the doctor to say, this is what was happening to my mother, because I have all of the information on my tech. Trust me. Low jack your parents. Trust me. Low jack them.
So former NFL coach Bill Belichick sat down with CBS's Mornings to talk about his new book, The Art of Winning. And at one point, he was asked how he met his 24-year-old girlfriend, Jordan Hudson. Take a look.
You have Jordan right over there. Everybody in the world seems to be following this relationship. They've got an opinion about your private life. It's got nothing to do with them, but they're invested in it. How do you deal with that?
Never been too worried about what everybody else thinks. Just try to do what I feel like is best for me and what's right.
How did you guys meet?
Not talking about this.
No?
No.
Okay, so apparently Jordan interrupted the interview multiple times. That wasn't the only time. So was CBS in the right to film her and include those moments within their interview? Why not?
Why not? I say, heck yes, they were in the right. Heck yes. This is the one thing that Jordan Hudson maybe doesn't know yet about life in public life. You know, you get to control the image and the message and the story that you tell on your Instagram, Jordan. You do not get to control journalists. And so that is why journalism exists, because that's fair game. And, you know, I don't want, Nate, let me be careful. I don't want that to come off as I'm attacking her, because what we don't know is who is actually in control of this. She looks like more of a manager than a girlfriend at that moment.
Yeah.
We don't know how much of that conversation beforehand was Bill saying, you make sure you step in if you hear something that you know I'm not going to like. So I'm not going to automatically blame her, but I do think it was in the right that the journalist showed.
I would go even further. I think it was within their right. I think they almost had no choice but to, because these are news producers, these are news journalists. She inserted herself into the story, you know, so they would be doing a disservice to their craft if they didn't. If she had interrupted maybe once, they might have been like, oh, okay, she's just being protective. But she became the story by interrupting multiple times. They were doing their job, I'd argue.
Yeah. I watched that. I watched that story yesterday morning. Tony DeCopo, thank you very much, my friend. Great journalism and the team. Because instead of us thinking about Bill and his wonderful career as the NFL coach with the most rings, we are all walking away and talking about the fact that his very young girlfriend was controlling the situation. You know what they say? He may be the head, but she's the neck. Because he wasn't making a move without her say-so, and she kept on interrupting. So he had, I felt like Tony had no choice but to do that. And this is a little inside baseball. In our industry, it's not uncommon for someone to be off to the side, interjecting. But usually it's because the person being interviewed has a court case coming up. So their lawyer's like, please don't answer that question. You can't answer that question. Or you have a celebrity who's in a disaster and their publicist is to the side going, we can't answer that question. That's going to lead, you know, it's going to turn into. But her sitting there where it's like, a very simple question. How'd you meet? And she was so defensive. I was like, girl, you just gave us a window. And now what I'm thinking is, Bill has 3 adult children from a previous marriage. I need to hear from them. Yeah. Because what is this relationship?
Well, you know what I'll say.
Right? What is this relationship?
All I could think about is the fact that she probably has a tracker on him.
Oh my God.
Most definitely.
She might.
I doubt he consented to it, but anyway.
You know what just occurred to me watching that too? All of that controlling of the narrative, but she couldn't control getting him a T-shirt without holes in it.
Oh,
Did you know
sorry, ribbed. I think that was the style.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's cool.
But here's
it's an
the thing.
old sweatshop, a sweat top that he's always wearing.
I wanted to jump on what you said. I just wanted to jump on what you said, Andrea, because it's like it does now make us start to question the dynamics and the power structure of that relationship naturally. But if you take a look, or you know the history of Bill Belichick, he is a notoriously introverted, quiet guy. He's had relationships and marriages. He's the guy who's the say-nothing guy. They ask him questions in an interview. He talks a little bit, but he says nothing.
Oh, I see.
And this is actually his history. So now, all of a sudden, he has a girlfriend who puts up pictures all over Instagram, and she's inviting us in. Yeah. This is the stuff she posts.
She's a mermaid?
She's a mermaid.
And he's a fisherman catching her.
So you know she probably bought that outfit, that costume for him, and was like, look, I'm such a great catch. Honey, why don't you dress up like a fisherman? I'll dress up like a mermaid.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, she is inviting us in.
Sure. Yeah.
He only got an Instagram account after the two of them started dating. I wonder why.
Yeah.
So it does make me ask questions. I don't want to be ageist and say he's got no agency, but I do want to ask him the question, without her in the room, are you okay?
Yes. Yes. See, and I don't think of him. He is quiet, but he's also notorious for running a very tight ship with his athletes and bringing other NFL players to tears. So I'm looking at him the whole time. I was like, who is this man? This is not the guy.
Yeah.
If you were a true football fan, you're like, what happened to this guy? This is a tough, no nonsense, and that's everybody knows him for that. So I was looking at it like, oh man, somebody needs to look into this. Elder abuse? I'm not saying, but it was like, it felt uncomfortable to watch, and that is why CBS put it out that way. Yeah. I'm just saying. Woo. More to come.
Okay, well, according to TMZ, Belichick and Hudson met on a flight, and actually the New York Times is reporting that the airport lounge has become the prime place to find tons of romance. People are getting dressed up or getting to the airport early to spend time there. So is the airport lounge an ideal place to find love?
Right? It sounds nice, right? I told you, listen, it sounds nice, and I've heard this story several times. I actually even have a girlfriend, Jenna Treat. She met her husband. They've been together for 15 years. She met him in the lounge. Wow. But as an avid traveler, I feel like I'm going to the wrong airport because I'm I'm looking at like baggage handlers, TSA officers, even the guy who's waving you in, and I'm not seeing these guys. So I'm like, maybe I need to go to a different airport. Maybe Toronto Pearson International is not working for me because I don't know about you guys. You guys see hot people in the airport? I'm just not seeing them.
You know where
I'm
they
never
are.
looking.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, good answer.
You are?
No, I'm never looking.
Oh,
no.
Good answer.
But now that you mention it. Hey, listen, because in the comments on this, someone suggested that they actually have a singles lounge at the airport
Not a
lounge.
bad
Like,
idea.
would you tip your toes into that water?
Gosh. And here's the deal. Would I go just to see? Yes. But my gut instinct, because I'm a pessimist, I'm like, I'm just imagining very young girls and old men and just a seedy nightclub vibe. But I could be wrong.
I don't know. Here's why I don't like this idea, and maybe this is what you're picking up on, is that there's a lot of anxiety. We've talked about this before you travel. I'm always being like, was my gate gonna change? Am I feeling a little bit anxious? I don't want to miss anything. I'm certainly not in a situation to get wrapped up or lost in a conversation, which is what you want when you meet someone. And not only that, the lighting in an airport.
You're right.
Awful.
I'm gonna say no. If you find love in that lighting,
That's
then
what I'm saying.
it's only up from there.
Yeah.
It's true love. We'll see. I think it might be thrilling for generations younger than we are because they actually have the potential of meeting someone in real life, which sounds old-fashioned.
Yeah.
But, that's how we met people. And for them, it's like, oh, my goodness, I can just meet someone like the old people used to in the olden days.
Maybe that's the
Someone
truth.
starting that app, it's like, I don't know, like Wings of Love, like something is going to happen.
gosh.
You know what? Stamped it no races, we're taking that.
Yeah.
Don't take that idea. Hey? So, listen to this story. The New York Times is reporting on a growing number of U.S. colleges that are now turning their student athletes into social media stars. So at the University of North Carolina, for example, at Chapel Hill, the athletic department encourages students to work with companies that will help them reach fame and hence money. So the question is, should schools be in this business of helping their athletes score these big brand deals? What do we think?
Why does this make me feel so funny then? I think I would like this story more if it were for professional athletes. Do you know what I mean? Like that's their job. That would be a big help for them, especially for female athletes who we know get paid quite a bit less. But for student athletes, I don't know, there's part of me that just wants them to be able to just student. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just work on school, play their sport, but this seems like another job and a great deal of stress on what should be, I think, that very specific time in life where you don't have to, you have the rest of your life to do that.
I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish towards you,
No,
but
I love.
that horse left the barn a long time ago, especially in the States. Student athletes, that is a full-blown business. That's been happening for decades. If you look at what happened
What
in the
about
NCAA,
student musicians and student artists, though? Are they doing that as well?
I don't know that they're leveraging their monetary
It's not the same.
way.
It's not the same following.
Yeah.
It's not the same. It's not the
I
same
say
access.
that, because I also think there is an age generational thing here. I think the idea of online life, that's a non-negotiable for any young person in 2025.
For sure.
I think that, and you don't have to be an athlete. You can just be someone in your basement doing YouTube.
But if you're,
and you're
if you're interested in that, I'm just
because you're on the show too, not just me. Sometimes I get excited. Sorry. Continue.
But like, if you're interested in that and you're an athlete, shouldn't you just go and get an agent or a manager to manage that? Like, why is the school getting involved?
That's what it.
I hear what you're saying, but if you know the history of the NCAA, who was taking advantage of student athletes for decades, and literally you could, if you stayed in a friend of the family's house, you could lose your whole scholarship over that. The rules were so ridiculous. So the fact that they're actually just accepting and allowing student athletes to make money now, it's a much better situation. And I think it actually has a pro, because let's be real, all of these kids are hearing that their peers are making millions of dollars, right? But think about it. You have to go to school, you have to focus on your sport, and now you also have contracts to go over for these opportunities, brand opportunities. It's perfect to have a person who's a liaison for the school, because the school has to look out, because the school's still like, yo, you belong to us. You're not here, you're here for free, but you are paying for it by being on these teams. So we do need to have someone who has our vested interest look out for these students and what contracts that they're signing, because the average 17-year-old kid who hasn't ever had to deal with a business contract does need that middle person.
I just want to clarify,
So I think it makes sense.
The school would have the student in their best interest. Wouldn't that be a
I just want to
position?
clarify because the article specifically says the school is not the agent.
No.
Okay.
The school has said, here is this person that we would recommend you work with. And so there is an agency that technically the school is not part of. However,
Are they getting
isn't there a
kickbacks?
slippery slope?
Yeah.
Are they
Like,
getting
what if
kickbacks?
all of a sudden you're a star athlete and you start to have real problems with your coach? Can you start messaging about that on Instagram? And what's going to happen?
You get in the portal, you go to another school.
But here's the thing. It's possible,
happens.
but I do ask the same question, which is who starts to police what you can and cannot do? And is the school, even though they're not technically your agent, do they get a say? And I think that's where it can become a little bit slippery, right?
Well, yeah, it's a new thing. It's called the general manager. A lot of schools, Duke was the first one to start this. A lot of schools are now hiring people. Listen, Nike executives are leaving their jobs to take these general manager jobs because there's so much money in it. First, to be a general
athletes.
to be general manager at the college, which is you're the liaison between the school and the students to help them navigate
Which
this
means
new
they're
world.
getting, if
And hopefully to help them navigate keeping their grades up.
I love that you think they're going to class and writing their papers. Of course they are. Of course they are.
Subscribe to the Social Podcast so you don't miss a fiery debate. Until next time, socialites.